Good evening and welcome to another Into the Terminal Dark Mode. Today we're going to be talking about running virtual machines using the Red Hat tool system. So let's jump right on in. So to start off with, I figured we'd show you the easy way of running virtual machines. So this is a system, excuse me, a systems web console provided by the Cockpit RPM. And so we've seen this, I think, a couple times before, where we can get things like the overview of the system, and you can apply updates and some other things. But one of the things that we have for it is the ability to add on a virtual machine manager. So we're going to go down to the terminal provided by this tool, and I'm going to do a DNF install cockpit dash machines. So several of these applications that you see on the left-hand side are modules that get installed into the cockpit interface, and we call them apps for the web console. So we're installing cockpit machines. It's picking up a couple of um, uh, dependencies like virt install. And once it's done, I'll just refresh the page and we'll see a new option. Maybe not. Maybe I'll be restarting the service over on the actual system. One second. Okay. Now we're back in business. All right. So we're back in. And what I wanted to see is this additional tool down here called virtual machines. So I'm just going to select it. And for our critical path, it's not recovering from an idiotic mistake of running updates right before your live show. It's instead to use this interface for installing a new virtual machine. So we're going to click the Create VM right here. And we're going to assign it a name. And this is going to be important because we're going to use this name for interacting with it later. So let's call it Eric System. And then the installation type, I have already downloaded a piece of install media, an ISO image. And so I'm going to put it or tell it the installation source is this location right there. So oftentimes when we get a new beta, I'll download it and run a VM to try it out. Notice the operating system gets populated automatically by looking at the ISO. We're going to create a new disk to hold this virtual machine's content. I'm just going to make it slightly larger, and I'm going to make the memory slightly larger. All right, and then down here, the box here immediately start the VM. So as soon as I hit create, it's actually going to boot the system as well. All right, so it is now busily creating. You can see the machine is now running. And if I click on its name here, notice I can see the VNC console. And let me just expand that a little bit. And so my options are to install RHEL 8.5 or test this media install RHEL 8.5. I'm going to choose to just start the installer here. So one of the cool things about the web console virtual machine plugin is that you can access the console for the system, but also, right, we could do things like look at the usage of the machine and what devices are in use and how its networking is set up. And you can also make changes to these properties of the virtual machine. We're booting the installer now. You can see over here the VNC console is running. And once the installer gets booting, we'll move to the second part of the show and we'll take a slightly deeper dive. All right, while that's working, I want to show one more option for creating a virtual machine. So if I go back here to virtual machines and hit create a new VM, I'm going to create a CentOS Stream 8 system. And this time I'm going to use the installation type of download an OS. And then what we're doing is we're picking what operating system we want to download and install off of this list. So I said I wanted to CentOS Stream 8. Again, we're going to create a 20 gig disk to hold it, and I'll give it a little bit more memory so it installs a little faster. And then if we did just this, it would download it and boot me into the installer where I could answer questions. But for these download an OS installs, you have this run unattended installation. And so you can choose what package set you want, provide a little bit more information like the root password, and you could even create a user. That's not required. And what will end up happening is it will run this install with a kickstart file, which is like answers to all the installer's questions automatically based off this profile that I've set. So for this one, it'll create a very small installed guest. So he's downloading the initial RAM disk image from the public content mirrors for sent to a stream. And then once it's downloaded that initial first stage ISO, it'll boot off of it. And we can see here, if we look at its console, right, it's booting off of that ISO, and then it's going to start the installer up. So we'll let these just perk, and we'll talk a little bit more depth of what's going on as we transition into the second part of the show. All right. So we're now in the second part of the show. Now's the time where you can ask questions via the chat, point out my copious flaws, and we will get to them as we can. But so we talked about doing this through the web console based virtual machine manager. I will tell you that this interface has evolved really rapidly over the last 3 years. We initially included it with RHEL 8, and over the last 3 years, it has gotten substantially more improved. Also, concurrent with RHEL 8, we obsoleted or deprecated our old virtual machine management software called virt Manager. So virt Manager is still in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 and Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9. Because deprecation doesn't mean we delete it. It means that we're telling you that we would like to remove it from the distribution. So when you're looking through release notes and you see something has been deprecated that you use, that's your signal that you should start looking for alternatives to that technology. So for virt Manager, we deprecated it in 8. We've kept it in RHEL 9 as well. So I would look at probably having it removed from the distribution in RHEL 10. That's likely when it'll fall off. So between now and 3 years from now, if you're using virt Manager as a graphical virtual machine management utility, you should probably check out Cockpit Machines as a replacement for it. All right, so we are a show called Into the Terminal, and I have not yet showed you any terminal. So let's fix that now. All right, so let me become root here. All right. So here we are running as root on this system, and there's a whole suite of command line utilities that you can use for interacting with virtual machines running on this hypervisor. Most of them are based in a command called virsh, virsh. So we can do things like a virsh list, and that shows you your running systems. Or if you do a virtual list dash dash all, that would show you all defined virtual machines on the system. Now we only have these two, but if there were others that were defined but turned off or paused or in some other non-running state, a dash dash all would show those as well. All right. The other things that we could do with virsh is control the virtual machines. So if I wanted to stop one of these, I could do a virsh shutdown. Let's do this one. And a shutdown is just like if you issue the shutdown command on the command line. It sends an ACPI signal to the system. And if it is in a state where it can accept that signal and power off, it will do so in a graceful way. So let me see. It sent the signal. Let's take a look at our virtual list. Still running. Let me take a look at the virtual machine itself over here in our virtual machines. Yeah, it looks like it has not honored that signal. because you can see over here in the console, maybe it's a little bit too small for you to read, but it's not actually shutting down the system. It started with the RAM disk for the installer, and that's where it's kind of sitting. So let me go back over to my terminal. If you really want this system to be shut down, you can do a virsh destroy. And what this is going to do is actually just turn it off. It's just like you held the power button in on that system and clicked off the power. It is not a graceful shutdown. So if the machine was in the middle of something, you just killed it in the middle of something. While it says destroy, it's really talking about the state of the machine. So the system will still exist. It will just be in a powered off state. All right, so we get our confirmation, and when I do a virsh list dash dash all, right, we can see that it's still there but shut off. If we go back over to the virtual machines application, right, it says please start the virtual machine to access its console. Its state is shut off. So we could still do things like edit it and make changes to the hardware of the machine. And when you've done whatever it is you want to do, you can click run, and it'll boot the machine back up again. Now this one, we hadn't finished its install, so it didn't actually put the operating system down into the virtual machine disk image yet. So that's why it shows over here, no bootable device. All right, but we can shut it down, or if that doesn't work, we can force shut down, which is that virsh destroy. All right. I see a couple of questions here. I see a welcome Ben Jenkins from Australia. Is Dowdle says RHEL 9 doesn't have the Spice QXL option anymore. Is that correct? It is correct. So we had deprecated Spice, which was a display protocol with RHEL 8, and it was removed in RHEL 9. So we don't offer Spice as a protocol anymore with virtual machine management in RHEL 9 and later. All right, let's see. Deprecation notices are the yep, okay. Is there a way to attach USB devices through web console? Good question. I don't think so. I mean, if you plug in a USB device, it'll automatically, well, that might be a function of the desktop. I don't know. That's a good question. Something we'll have to take a look at later, I think. All right, so that's the questions that we've got here. So let's jump back into our command line utilities for managing guests. So if I said that there were a whole bunch of options with virsh, and in fact, thanks to tab completion, you can see that there's like 273 options with virsh. And so we can do all kinds of things here. We can do things like make changes to the hardware of the guest. So we can add virtual CPUs. We can change the amount of memory associated with the guest. We can add additional disks to the guest, all kinds of stuff here from the command line. Typically, you'll want to do that when the machine is turned off. Although I have seen for some activities, you can do hot hardware addition to guests, but not everything will support hot hardware addition. Some other things of interest, virsh dump XML. I'm just going to type that to less. So on most virtualization platforms, there are two things that make a virtual machine. One is the machine image, right? So the actual file in which the virtual machine was installed. And you take that file and you copy it, and you're essentially copying the state of all the stuff within the virtual machine. But the other thing that you need if you're trying to import a machine to another system, another hypervisor, is you need all the settings and configuration to go with that disk image. And that's what this XML file is. So again, I got it by a virsh dump XML and the machine name. and it prints out this XML, which I could redirect to a file if I wanted to then send it to someone else with my disk image. So every machine gets a unique UUID assigned to it. And then as we look through, we can see things like I said, this machine should have 4 gigs of RAM. And so right here, current memory unit is in kilobytes, kibibytes, and it's 4196 roughly. We have a CD-ROM attached to the system. We've got a hard disk attached to the system. What else? There's some stuff about how we handle timing, which is pretty standard. It got pre-populated automatically. Right here, these guys are kind of interesting. So if you said that you wanted to pause this machine, could we do that? So suspend memory means keep it in RAM, but just don't have any clock cycle or any CPU cycles dedicated to it. Suspend disk means take all of its memory and persist it to a disk so that we can resume that system later. All right, some other interesting things right here. So when we were creating the virtual machine, I said I wanted a 20 gig disk assigned to it as its virtual machine image. And it asked me if it could go out and create it. So here we have our definition for this disk device, right? That's actually a file. And here's the location of the file. So if I was trying to share this virtual machine with someone else for them to import it into their hypervisor, I'd give them a copy of this XML, and I'd give them a copy of this file referenced here as the disk layout for the system. If you have more than one disk attached to the system and it's across multiple images or it's stored in other block devices, you would have to provide them all the components to make the system back again that are referenced here in the XML. All right, I said that there was a CD-ROM attached. Here it actually tells us like what disk is in that CD-ROM. Right now, it's that RHEL 85 beta install ISO that we booted the machine off of. And then we start to get into things like the network configuration or the network devices that are attached to it, the serial port that's attached to it, and a few other things. These are pretty standard items to have auto-populated when you create a virtual machine. So when we went and created a new virtual machine through the web console, it created all these definitions for us automatically. All right, so that's the XML. All right, we can also look at things like our hypervisor networking. So virsh net list. So these are all of our networks defined on our hypervisor. Right now, we just have one called default that's active. And if we were to go back into that individual ERIC system XML, we would see that it was actually attached to this network behind the scenes. So you could do things like a virsh net define to make new networks and define additional IP settings or networks that should be offered to the system. You can actually plumb virtual machines to talk on multiples. You can plumb your virtual machine to do things like bridging on devices. And that would be done through the XML file for the machine. All right, if we wanted to find out more about this default network, just like we did a virsh dump XML of our virtual machine definition, we do a virsh net dump XML, and then you specify the network you're interested in by its name. And so if you've ever wondered why your virtual machines are automatically natted on a 192.168.122 network, that's because this default network that gets defined automatically uses the 192.168.122 network address range for its stuff. And then inside of that, it also offers DHCP through a service called DNS mask. And these are the ranges of IPs that will assign to machines as they come up and are assigned an IP out of that pool. All right, I think the last virsh command I want to cover before I switch back over and see if there are any more questions is one called virsh auto start. This is a machine level, So let's do a virsh list. All. So this is a machine level setting. It will update a parameter in that machine's XML. And what it has done is it has tagged this machine to automatically start when the hypervisor starts. So if for something happened, like the machine, I don't know, had some updates installed on it, and the idiot administrator forgot to reboot before his critical thing, um, and then they rebooted. So now that this machine is auto started, when they reboot the hypervisor, the virtual machine will be automatically booted when the hypervisor is booted as well. So auto start means boot when the hypervisor boots. And this might be useful if you're doing things like um, uh, systems in a remote data center that's difficult for you to get access to, so that you can have it kind of at least best as it can recover automatically by just trying to start up all the VMs again. Um, so that's an interesting setting that you can apply, and I think this is even in our virtual machine management interface here. Let me double check. Oh yeah, right here. Run when host boots. Right, that's your auto start. So you can see that there's a really tight correlation between commands that we can run with virsh on the command line and the options offered here through the web console. Um, and why that's important is when we get into things like automation, or writing shell scripts or management scripts. Virsh is how you would do that to help build these tools to work with your virtual machines running on this hypervisor. All right. So let me see if there are any more options. Is the auto start a flagging set in cockpit? Well, as though by magic, it's like I pay a doctor to ask me questions. Um, can you edit the domain XML in cockpit? Let's see. So I don't think you can edit it directly, but when you do things like add a disk, so we'll create one. Right, so I just created another disk to attach to the system. And let me go back over the terminal. What's this? This is CentOS Stream 8. All right, so you can see that when I added the disk through the web console interface, it adjusted the XML definition for this machine. So when I created it, I said I wanted a new volume called test disk one, and it created it here. Let me see if there's another definition. Doesn't look like there's anything else beyond that. It created file, and that's where its capacity would be, is actually the size of this QCOW2 file. So I should see on my hypervisor also a new file called testdisk1.qcow2 that is 1 gig in size. So you don't edit the XML directly through the Cockpit Machines application, but changes you make there do adjust the XML behind the scenes. Now, why would we do that? Because you may have looked at that XML and kind of scratched your head and gone, "Wow, that looks really complex," and it can be complex. And if you make mistakes, all of a sudden it doesn't parse correctly, and your virtual machines are jacked. So using the web console interface for cockpit machines allows you to not have to worry about the XML formatting and all the options that go in your XML tags. It just puts the right stuff in there. But if you do want to edit it and do things by hand, that's where virsh dump XML, put in a file, make your edits, and then, sorry, my little horse here, virsh import, I think. Mm, there's another virsh command that you use for um, pulling in an XML. I thought it was import, but I don't see that. Oh, what you do is you do an undefined, which would remove its XML, and then you do a define. Yeah. Um, that XML file, and that would put it back into place. So an undefined will delete it from the system. So let me look at my virtual list. Virtual list. So if I wanted to get rid of this sent to a stream box forever, I could do a virsh undefined, and that deletes it. If I had edited and changed the XML, I could do a virsh define file like that. So as long as I have the disk image positioned wherever the XML file says it should be, and I have the XML file, this is how you actually import a machine to a hypervisor using virsh. All right. Uh, why no CentOS Stream 9? So there is a CentOS Stream 9. In fact, if we go and hit the new virtual machine here and virtual machine right here. So if I choose the operating system, there is a CentOS Stream 9. But earlier today, when we were trying this, we were getting kernel panics on my RHEL 8 hypervisor. And I noticed that I had actually downloaded a RHEL 9 install ISO, and I tried that out before our call or our show tonight. And that also created a similar kernel panic. So to avoid having that ugliness, I simply used 8 because it just worked. But that's something that one day maybe I'll look at why I'm getting a kernel panic when I boot install media from either RHEL 9 or CentOS Stream 9 on my RHEL 8 hypervisor, because I think it should be okay. All right. So we are right at the half-hour mark. So thank you for tuning in tonight. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if you would like to be notified of content that we're posting or doing in the future, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you think somebody else would be use this, share it with them. Also, if you have any further questions that weren't answered live or you're a deferred viewer, you can talk with us via the comments on the video. I would like to remind you that in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a format change for Into the Terminal. So next week, we will run the normal schedule. We'll do our morning show at 10 a.m. Eastern US. We'll do our last dark mode at 9 p.m. Eastern US. Then the week after that, we're going to move to Fridays at noon US. And we're only going to do one show because my significant other wouldn't appreciate it too much that I would spend my Friday nights doing dark mode instead of family time. So we're going to terminate dark mode, sig kill, in a couple of weeks. So next week will be our last dark mode. If you are a dark mode aficionado, thank you for joining me for the show's run. But we're going to go back to only light mode starting the week of July 3rd, I believe, is the start of that week. So that Friday will be our first Friday noon US Eastern time. All right, I don't see any other questions. So again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it, and we will see you next time.